Hello, everyone, and welcome to the McCain Institute for International Leadership's Peer-to-Peer Protective Project Virtual Finals. My name is Brett Steele. I serve as the Director of Prevention and National Security for the McCain Institute, and I will be your MC today. Please join me in watching a welcome video from Cindy McCain, Chair of the McCain Institute Board of Trustees.
Thank you for joining the McCain Institute's Peer-to-Peer Protective Project Final Competition. This is a new program for the McCain Institute, and it's incredibly relevant in these difficult times. When James Alex Fields Jr. deliberately drove his car through a crowd of peaceful protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia, my husband called on all Americans to unite against hatred and bigotry. Peer-to-Peer challenged students from 8 universities to do just that, catalyze movements to end hate and school-based violence. Participating teams worked through a global pandemic, historic job losses, and civil unrest to create and deliver dynamic campaigns on these pressing issues. We chose the top 3 teams to compete in the final for up to $5,000 in prize money. The McCain Institute is committed to advancing character-driven leadership, and I could not be more proud of the courage and tenacity these students have shown in overcoming all obstacles to address hate-based violence at a time when we need it more than ever. I'm inspired by what the next generation of leaders has accomplished in a single semester, and I know you will be too.
All right, so we have an exciting program for you today. As Cindy McCain mentioned, 8 teams of university students spent an entire semester designing and deploying dynamic campaigns to address hate and school-based violence. We selected the top 3 finalists to showcase for you today. The finalists from Arizona State University, Johns Hopkins University, and Missouri State University will each present a 15-minute video featuring their campaigns and then respond to 5 minutes of live questions and answers with our esteemed panel of judges. Our judges will have up to 10 minutes to deliberate, and then we'll announce the finalists or the awards live here in this feed today. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the video submission from the Arizona State University team, Insight.
We have all seen shocking acts of violence in the media. Some of these hit close to home. Hate-based violence leaves people injured and traumatized, sometimes even takes their lives. Beyond those directly impacted, it haunts the families of people hurt by it and leaves a stain on entire communities. The violent act of a single person can cause damage that ripples out and lingers much longer than the act itself.
You say you saw a short guy walking with a rifle in the middle of Westgate.
Correct.
What was he doing?
He was just he let two shots off, and then he was walking, and then when he hit the corner, he just started running.
Hello, my name's Armando Jr. Hernandez, and I'm gonna be the shooter of Westgate 2020. Let's get this done, guys.
When communities feel most desperate, it's important to remember that violence can be prevented. In preventing violence, the first step is to understand why it's taking place at all. What you just saw is not the first act of violence to result from incel ideology. Incels are a community existing largely on the internet, brought together by shared loneliness and the rage that stems from it. They are involuntary celibates, incels, and the community they form does not alleviate their loneliness, but instead fans the flames of their anger. Those that hold this ideology believe that women are to blame for their inability to form romantic relationships. They spur each other on to take action in a world they feel has treated them unfairly, and against the people they believe are to blame for this unfairness. In extreme cases, incelism can lead to acts of great violence, such as the one at a Santa Barbara sorority house in 2014, and most recently, the shooting at Westgate Plaza in Glendale, Arizona. In response to the violence already committed by the incel movement and the threat of violence in the future, we selected this group as the focus of our anti-hate campaign. After careful research and examination of other successful communication campaigns, we found that storytelling was incredibly successful in encouraging a change in attitude and behavior. We also found that many college freshmen experience some of the same feelings that emerging incels do. That is, loneliness or a desire for belonging. Because of this, we chose to focus on preventing early, college-age individuals from joining the incel movement and use narrative as our primary communication tool. Our team asked friends, family, and fellow Sun Devils to share their stories about times they felt lonely, isolated, or uncertain about their future, and about their path to overcoming these challenges. We took their stories and shared them in online spaces using Instagram and Facebook as our main platforms. We recorded discussions of the same topics, struggles with the uncertainty starting college, loneliness, and finding community, and we turned it into a podcast on SoundCloud. All of these tools allowed us to run a campaign called Insight, addressing a population susceptible to joining the incel movement. While we face some challenges during the process, our campaign continues to address the growing problem that incels pose on society.
We chose incels for our project because we have all witnessed some form of misogyny, sexual harassment, or sexual entitlement on campus, which are ideas central to the perpetuation of the incel movement. Upon further research, we saw how incels could create violence and extremism within their cultures. And given our position as college students, we wanted to use this opportunity to directly confront some of the ideologies we saw on campus.
One of the problems with the incel movement that I think is interesting but sad about them is that they tend to breed amongst themselves almost. And what I mean by that is somebody will say one thing and somebody else will parrot it, and they'll never solve their own problems because they'll be too busy retelling their own stories of woe is me and I can't believe this happened, or did you hear this? It's one big false narrative that they just keep recycling to themselves to make sure everybody's on the same page. And at the end of the day, as much as these people are capable of doing terrible things, I think they're also capable of doing great things once they get out of this, or once they are shown another way or another road that is not necessarily the same chat room they've been in for 5 or 10 years.
The concept of someone being part of a hate group because they're involuntarily celibate is a little bit laughable, a little bit absurd, and not taking this group seriously is what allows them to do so much damage.
I think there's a few reasons why we should be discouraging people from thinking of themselves as incels. The first is because the incel movement does motivate a very misogynistic way of thinking. And as we start moving forward and promoting gender equality in all of our institutions, it's important that we keep that misogynistic way of thinking out of everyone's mind, because we want to keep working towards something more progressive. But I also think that incelism does have a very high potential for violent and extreme forms of attack, such as the shooting at Westgate or the shooting at the Santa Barbara sorority house just a few years ago. So we really do want to be able to prevent some of those mass acts of violence before they even have the potential to start.
In order to ensure efficiency and effectiveness of our messaging strategies, we maintained a strict target audience. Our audience was narrowed down to Arizona youth in the age range of 16 to 26. Though our research suggested that incels are predominantly male, a significant female incel population also exists. In light of this finding, we chose to include both males and females in our target audience. Per a suggestion from an advisor at Southern Poverty Law Center, we also targeted those with an interest in gaming, as this interest appeals to many of those who identify with incelism. We believe that this audience includes youth at risk of joining the incel community, as well as those that may presently be involved with incel-related activities. Geographically, we limited our campaign to Arizona. ASU has the largest collegiate student body in the nation, and we felt that this would be an appropriate scope for our initial efforts. This would allow for us to capitalize on ASU's complementary resources.
Nearly all successful communication campaigns begin with sound theory. Theory helps us distinguish which variables are relevant and which are irrelevant, and that helps us understand where we should be focusing our attention. Once we know which variables are important, theory helps us interpret the relationships between those variables, leading to valid explanations and predictions. Finally, theory provides a frame for understanding our audience and for their reactions to our content. Our research was incredibly important for helping us make decisions. There was one key finding that emerged from both our data collection as well as from reading academic literature online and incel ratings online. It told us that many people are familiar with the term incel, as well as all of the connotations that go along with that word. We were guided by theory and ongoing research and decided not to include the term incel in our own messaging. That's because insights from reactance theory told us that our audience probably would have picked up on the fact that we were trying to reach them specifically. It's very likely that because we used the word incel, they would have rejected our message before they ever had a chance to read or internalize the content.
Our examination of existing research showed that people most likely to adhere to the incel mindset were young men between the ages of 16 and 26. We also found that women between those same ages were most likely to experience negative interactions with men who identify to some degree as incels. As the project progressed, we continued to search for information on message boards, in news stories, and on other online repositories to help us understand issues related to incel membership. We found messages from reformed incels and others who have left the group. We also found stories of men who used plastic surgery and other drastic means to try and fit in. We used these continuously evolving insights and new information to help refine and adapt our message, strategies, and social media posts. In designing the content for social media sites, we strove to make the posts appealing to our target demographic. We included photos of the story's authors to create a more personal narrative. The content was very cohesive, and we kept a consistent template and color scheme across all of our posts. This was part of our strategy to make our brand and campaign recognizable and memorable.
Our project's messaging was originally based on and inspired by Humans of New York, which is a project originally created by Brandon Standen, in which he interviews people from different walks of life, mostly strangers off of the streets of New York, and he posts them in the form of short photo blogs on his social media. Something amazing about stories is that they can enable and inspire empathy in people, even if they've never met the person. Just a short photo blog can be enough to even compel a narrative or a community for those that have experienced similar experiences. So we wanted to use that and post stories about overcoming loneliness and isolation on our social media to show people that there are healthy ways of overcoming loneliness. And to incels specifically, doesn't necessarily have to rely on the loneliness cycle that we often see in incel forums.
Over the course of this project, we created several vehicles to reach our targeted at-risk population. Our social media pages on Instagram and Facebook and our podcast series on SoundCloud are very important to be able to not only be recognizable online, but also to be able to interact with other online users. To this end, our social media outreach pages were a core element of our campaign. From online advertising to posting relatable story content, our social media specialist provided quick and accessible content to promote our message. Secondly, our podcast helped to give our campaign a legitimate voice that could be heard by our target audience. The idea for creating a podcast series to play alongside our social media campaign was that it would act as another platform of relatability that would feature the voices of real people sharing their own experiences in a genuine way, without much scripting or prompting.
I was able to utilize a variety of success measures, but I largely focused on social media engagement. I believe that the project fared extremely well on our success measures. Our total impression numbers were over 115,000. Based upon these outcome measures, I would say this project was an extreme success.
Our analyses suggested that we exceeded our estimated measures of success. In regard to our social media funding, our final cost per 1,000 impressions came out to $4.27. Our cost per post engagement came out to only 35 cents, surpassing our expectations. We initially had strived for a goal of a couple of thousand impressions with a $500 budget allocated towards advertising and social media funding. The response we obtained was completely unexpected. Not only did we maximize our funding costs, but we also were able to witness how our stories impacted our audience. We had a variety of submissions from outside sources who simply wanted to share their story as well. Fiscally and socially, we were able to exceed our prospects while achieving our goal of directly impacting the community. This project was not without its challenges, but it proved to be an opportunity for learning and adapting.
One of the biggest challenges we faced in this project was the COVID-19 situation. It became impossible to meet in person for meetings. And it became impossible to do on-campus functions and activities.
We had to switch trains of thought and our methodology in order to accomplish it. But I honestly think that even though that was one of our biggest challenges, I think that that was kind of an interesting turn of events that ended up working out a little bit better for us.
Our core strategy allows for the campaign to live beyond this program cycle and scale to other similar contexts and locations. We anticipate that, eventually, our social media followers would submit their own stories and contribute to developing content. Followers are encouraged to submit their stories, and we in turn post them, which generates more impressions, which in turn generates more followers and impressions. Although our campaign was adapted to ASU, our research suggests that this problem is widespread. Keeping consistent with the core concepts, our campaign could easily be adapted for virtually any university with content developed by and for the local student population. Our campaign, Insight, gave us the opportunity to address incelism at its core, the loneliness and psychological distress that leads to violent outbursts. As opposed to taking an aggressive stance against this group and trying to erase their communities or mute their voice, we instead provided a peaceful alternative. Incels create community out of an effort to meet a basic human need, but the community they create buries them deeper in toxic ideology. Insight strove to offer a way out. It is a community built around loneliness and struggle that instead offers solutions.
All right, thank you, Insight, for that incredible submission. Now we're turning to the live question and answer component of our program. We have an august panel of judges, and we will give them 5 minutes to ask questions of each team in turn following their videos. Our judges include Mark Green, Executive Director of the McCain Institute for International Leadership, former Administrator of USAID, Ambassador, and Congressman. Nick Rasmussen, the incoming Executive Director of the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism. Nick has also served as the Senior Director for the National Security and Counterterrorism Programs at the McCain Institute and Director of the National Counterterrorism Center. David Gersten, the Acting Director of the DHS Office of Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention. Beth Goldberg, Research Program Manager at Jigsaw at Google. Kim Dozier, CNN Global Affairs Analyst, Sophia Gross, Public Policy Manager for Snap Incorporated, and last but not least, Rick Shamgrad Jr., President of Santana Education, and incidentally, the first investor in this program in his prior role at ASU Enterprise Partners. Judges, please turn on your cameras if you have not done so already. Representing the Insight team from Arizona State University, I introduce Amanda Endales, Madison Andrade, Claire Cirelli, Sean Kelly, and Cameron Lizick. Judges, you now have 5 minutes to ask questions of these students. I ask that we keep the questions and answers brief so that we can include as many responses as possible. Who has the first question?
Brett, can I jump in?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Kim.
Fast video, very slickly done. But one of the questions that I didn't get answered was, what is the best way to reach out to this community? How big is the problem? And how much overlap does it have with the larger youth population and issues of loneliness and estrangement?
Some of our initial research findings of Arizona State introductory courses showed us that there were very high prevalence rates of loneliness among our own student body. In conducting research of the incels, we found that this was an overlapping theme. So we chose to target our own student population because we believe there is quite a bit of overlap and there's quite a bit of incentive for incoming freshmen to feel displaced and perhaps look to incelism as a foundation for them.
I'd love to have more about the post. What kind of try to impart?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'd love to hear more about the content of the posts and what kind of tools you were to impart.
So the content of our posts largely consisted of a narrative from certain individuals that offered their stories. And this content stemmed from the question how they overcame a time of loneliness and what they did to, get over that and overcome those certain obstacles. And we just wanted to impart that to certain individuals who are viewing our platform in order for them to get a sense of how to overcome obstacles in a positive way.
There are other judges with questions. Yes, Mark.
So first off, I thought it was exceptional. I'm very impressed with what you've done. The quality of the work is great. One question I had, not being from Arizona, so being more of a distance, early on, you have that young man clearly troubled, and the incident, which I suspect spurred you on in some ways. I wanted to know more about him. So it was almost as if at the end of this, you should have gone back and profiled who that person was, and in some ways how your messages and your very good work might have applied to his situation. Is there anything there in terms of his profile that immediately fits into what you're doing?
In terms of timing, something that was very unfortunate is the Glendale shooting that you're referring to happened actually just weeks ago.
Okay.
So we had already chosen incels as our group and we're quite disheartened to see something so massive so close to home, but it really reinvigorated our efforts because it showed us and demonstrated very painfully how close of an issue this is to us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to ask a question. This is Sophia Gross from Snapchat. Thanks so much. It's just amazing. And these are all topics that, of course, we're thinking a lot about here. So I'd love to understand just from your research, really this question of community that is lacking and not even necessarily the actual mental health resources as part of that conversation versus the mental health resources. And I'm curious, what you saw in your research, how those two topics are convening with one another, or if they should be treated separately entirely.
In terms of scalability, mental health is something we would definitely like to address in the future, especially if we were able to increase our budget. We would definitely put funds into connecting students to mental health resources. Our campus offers very low cost counseling. So part of our scalability is to introduce students to that and show them that there are mental health options on campus. The reason that we chose to keep them separate is some insights from reactance theory showed us that if certain populations felt targeted with a message, maybe targeted with the message that you need help, they would have rejected our message before internalizing the content. Therefore, we felt that community was a little bit more engaging.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Beth, Nick, or David, any questions for the team, or Rick?
Yeah, this is Beth from Google. I'd love to jump in with a question. And first, absolutely fantastic job. That's a really compelling presentation. And incels are definitely top of mind at Google these days. I really liked your focus on belonging and community, but I'm also interested to know how misogyny and male supremacy played into the campaign content itself. Was that part of the narratives that you were using, or did you sort of intentionally avoid directly touching on misogyny?
We did address misogyny, or not directly, but we lent a lot of time to putting a lot of time into the narratives of a woman specifically. And also we had one specific story about a gentleman that a romantic relationship didn't work out, and seeking help, and also realizing that even though it didn't work out and that wasn't ideal, but it wasn't that he necessarily deserved that relationship, and coming to realize that. So in a way, we did address misogyny.
Thanks.
And David, I think I saw a hand from you, and we've got 1 more minute for questions and answers.
Great. First off, just a comment. I thought it was terrific that you addressed known risk factors in this area, in particular, the risk factor of loneliness. But that said, I do wonder if you attempted to try and focus in on key triggering events that can occur as somebody perhaps mobilizes to commit a lone offender attack, and whether or not in trying to find key triggering events, if you worked any of those into your campaign.
When we ran a regression on our data collection, we found that loneliness could be predicted by low self-esteem and low satisfaction with life. So while those are perhaps not triggering events, they are definitely triggering factors, and those are a core component of loneliness.
All right, thank you everyone, both judges and students, for your excellent questions and answers. Next up, I am pleased to introduce the video submission from Johns Hopkins University team, Connect to Protect.
Now, a short time ago, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency.
Across the country, at least 21 million kids now home from school.
We had to develop a story that exemplified the importance of personal connection while under the restrictions of social distancing.
Students who took part in our campaign rated themselves as 19% higher when asked about the level of understanding they have about racism on our campus.
More likely to engage in social causes to promote inclusivity on our campus.
The words that people get labeled with upon first impression are most likely based upon physical attributes.
Our campaign, Connect to Protect, sought to combat microaggressions that could lead to targeted violence by creating an environment of inclusivity. We accomplished this through social media initiatives, trivia nights, and inclusivity challenges. Overall, we garnered 180,000 media impressions and increased participants' awareness about targeted violence in our community.
Our campaign, Connect to Protect, is an initiative aimed at reducing targeted hate and school-based violence through inclusion. It encourages students to embrace positive labels by fostering a connected community. We aimed to educate students on topics related to racism, targeted violence, and inclusion. We chose to address the issue of racism, as based on our preliminary research, the majority of Hopkins students reported that racism is the most prevalent issue on our campus.
We chose the silent majority as our target audience. This is because our research showed that the majority of students already had a set opposition against targeted violence. However, very few of them were involved in prevention strategies. 72% of the students surveyed said that they had a role to play against targeted violence. But 78% of these students were not currently involved with fighting for a cause related to targeted violence. We believed that we could shift their mindset and encourage them to take action against targeted violence. We chose the uncommitted population as our secondary target market because we believe that with a successful campaign, we could encourage them to change their mindset. We then conducted further research on our audience to produce the most successful campaign possible.
We conducted our preliminary research through 3 tactics: a pre-campaign survey, in-depth interviews, and a focus group. Our pre-campaign survey results demonstrated that over 80% of the students
rated themselves as 7 or higher on feeling included, with 1 being not very included and 10 being very included. However, Black or African American students had a much lower average rating of 6.7. Additionally, 55% of the students indicated that they fear hate-based violence. In the in-depth interviews, students believed that the diversity of the Johns Hopkins campus makes us especially susceptible to school shootings because a lot of school violence has hate-based motives against minorities. Many students also indicated that they currently do not participate in activism because they believe these events have low success rates. Finally, during the focus group, the majority agreed that there are few incidences of targeted violence at Johns Hopkins, but there is a large presence of microaggressions, especially relating to racism. Therefore, it became clear to us that our campaign would combat microaggressions relating to racism. We used the results of our preliminary research and applied them to all of our tactics for the campaign, including our social media, the advertising messaging, and the campaign strategy and implementation events.
We created a 360 comprehensive campaign, ranging from social media challenges to video initiatives to events, in order to address the issue of microaggressions. The insight that drove our campaign was this: allowing small acts of microaggressions here and there can create a snowball effect, leading to greater acts of mass-targeted violence. A prominent source of microaggressions is stereotypes that are formed upon first impression, often relating to physical attributes. Therefore, we can drastically mitigate rates of microaggression, slurs, and hateful words by fostering an environment of connectivity. To illustrate this idea clearly, we developed the Labels campaign.
The Labels initiative was primarily illustrated through our video advertisement. When creating the video, we faced a unique challenge. We had to develop a story that exemplified the importance of personal connection while under the restrictions of social distancing. However, with the insight that coronavirus has surfaced and normalized stereotypes, we were able to communicate the idea that the words that people get labeled with upon first impression are most likely based upon physical attributes and can then lead to dangerous stereotypes that can initiate targeted violence. So as you can see, we were cleverly able to communicate the importance of connecting to prevent against targeted violence, all while remaining sensitive to the world's most current issue at the time of coronavirus. To bring this message full circle, we had students on Instagram post a story with a word they think represents something positive about themselves that people can't usually see. This was the Positive Labels initiative. So, for example, we had students say, "I am a good listener," "I am a good friend," etc., which allowed students to show their peers how they view themselves beyond physical appearance. The Connect Protect website was a home base for all of the different moving pieces of our campaign, from the About Us page to the checklist and blog posts to information about virtual events. Everything we created for this campaign lived on this site. Our landing page highlights the most prominent aspects of our branding and mission for the website and campaign. Our website was developed via Wix.com and connected to Google Analytics so we could track our progress throughout the campaign. Our website resulted in a total of 1,200 impressions. We found this statistic significant considering all of the content that was put on our site was mainly delivered to our audience via other platforms like social media due to the coronavirus.
As mentioned, the website featured 11 content pieces. This included 6 blog posts related to different aspects of targeted violence, 3 informative checklists about our campaign, and 2 BuzzFeed-style quizzes, with results that show everyone that they have the ability to be inclusive.
After hearing the announcement that our campaign would be moving to a virtual setting, we had to come up with ideas for events that could still keep our audience engaged. We spoke with our friend Stephen Walsh, a Hopkins alum who runs his own trivia sessions via Zoom, and realized that we could engage our classmates and teach about our campaign through the fun trivia events as well. During implementation period, we held trivia sessions each week on the Kahoot platform, in which students could join and compete for fun prizes like Amazon gift cards and Apple AirPods. The trivia content included questions specific to our campaign, race history at our university, as well as some fun pop culture questions to lighten the mood, as many of our questions contained heavy content.
Promotion of trivia occurred mainly through Facebook, where the events were hosted and shared. Each student in the class also changed their cover photo to a Connect to Protect shield to generate awareness for the campaign. Facebook is extremely popular at Hopkins, which explains the 58,000 impressions achieved here. Another major social media platform on our campus is Instagram. This was used to inform and interact with our audience, mainly through our theme of labels. Examples of this include the Labels interview series on our feed, where we dug deeper into the labels featured on our video. In the end, these efforts resulted in 54,000 impressions. Lastly, for social media, we hosted a Snapchat contest, where participants could keep a streak with our campaign by sending in completion of daily inclusivity challenges. For example, they could answer the question, how are you going to make Hopkins a more inclusive campus? This was a more intimate way to connect with our audience and earned us 500 impressions. Finally, the website contained a press tab where we could post updates on any press hits that our campaign received. Our 3 press releases and press kit landed articles in local, national, and international outlets, such as Kahoot.com and the Johns Hopkins Twitter page. Press earned the campaign a total of 65,000 impressions.
Our post-research results demonstrated a change among students who participated in our events. Students who took part in our campaign through tactics such as trivia rated themselves as 19% higher when asked about the level of understanding they have about racism on our campus compared to when previously surveyed. Students who engaged with Connect to Protect had a 5% increase in feeling as if they could prevent targeted violence themselves, and a 4% increase in a likelihood to stand up to injustices. This shows that our campaign made a measurable impact on our audience and was successful.
For the campaign, we allocated 59% of the budget to the Campaign Strategy and Implementation Department, 35% to the PR and Social Media Department, and 6% to the Advertising Department. Based on calculations of the budget spent, donations, impressions, and other factors, we determined that the impressions per student is 27.08.
The main challenge we faced was keeping our audience engaged while being miles away from them. Based on previous adventure campaigns, more traction and a larger audience would have been gained by being on campus. But most of all, being on campus encourages more in-person dialogue and discussion, leading people to ask more questions and wanting to know more about targeted violence. We had to make sure our tactics would still encourage this level of discussion. Because of this, we decided to make our social media very interactive and not simply use it to promote our campaign. We also hosted trivia where we encouraged people to use the chat function to stay engaged and have these conversations and move them into everyday life after the event was over.
By implementing Connect to Protect campus ambassadors, the labels and inclusion-themed social media challenges of the campaign can be further shared across social networks. Connect to Protect ambassadors would encourage those in their campus communities to take part in the challenges previously instituted in the Johns Hopkins community. They would be a part of a larger Connect to Protect network where they could share with other campuses how they are promoting inclusivity to fight against targeted violence in their school community. Additionally, the trivia events could be brought to surrounding universities such as Loyola University and the University of Maryland, and eventually reach universities in cities and states where targeted violence is very prevalent and more education and inclusivity is needed. These universities could collectively compete in virtual trivia events against each other, which would emphasize university-wide connection and collaboration while educating these communities. And finally, A Connect to Protect charter could be established on campus in coordination with the Office of Multicultural Affairs. This charter would focus on the inclusion of minority groups and the mitigation of targeted violence and acts of microaggressions toward underrepresented individuals. This charter would implement the tactics and messaging of our campaign while connecting with minority individuals to garner a greater reach and personalization.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our presentation.
All right, thank you, Connect to Protect, for your video submission. I now welcome Johns Hopkins University students, Christine Cho, Natalie Farrell, Cole Bleichenhaus, Cecilia Zayas, to turn on your video feed and answer our judges' questions. Students and judges, you have 5 minutes. I want to give priority to Nick and Rick, who are not able to ask questions in the last round. Nick, jump in.
So first of all, kudos to the Hopkins team. I thought it was a terrific presentation. I was really attracted to the labels focus and the compelling way you introduced the problem set that you saw on campus. And I also like very much the way you targeted the so-called silent majority on campus. Now, you obviously did a great job of capturing volume of impressions, and therefore you've got some very good quantitative measures of how your campaign succeeded. But how did you think about it from a qualitative perspective? What you mentioned very near the end of the presentation was you had a very engaging chat set of activities with campaign targets and participants. Was there some way to capture that data in terms of how the qualitative engagement of your target audience affected, or could you capture that data somehow beyond just mere impressions? Thank you.
Yeah, so we could look at it in terms of conversations started. For example, with the Snapchat aspect of it, there was 32 conversations started about inclusion. So each social media platform had its own engagement feature.
Rick, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Brett. Fantastic, Hopkins. Very nice presentation. Great focus on microaggressions. Yeah, as you look at your channels and your impressions, I always think there's a difference between raising awareness and a call to action, and that different channels do different things. Different channels are good for awareness. Different channels are good for action. Sort of follows on Nick's question. Can you give me some insights into which channels you thought were best for raising awareness, and which ones you think were best for actually calling the participants to action?
Yes, so each social media platform had its own strategy. Instagram was mainly informative, just with the feed and the stories we shared there. And then Facebook was really great to share information about our trivia events and get people to interact there. And then Snapchat was also a more intimate way to interact with people. So each platform had its own specific focus.
Sophia, I know they featured
would love to.
So I want to give you a chance to jump in here.
Thanks so much, guys. I couldn't tell, you couldn't see my video, but big smile on my face when I saw the Snapchat integration, and specifically as it relates to PVE, so preventing violent extremism, that intimate nature of being able to actually speak to someone in a more closed network. Obviously, we've all done the research, but really thoughtful. Please follow up with me. I will make sure the McCain Institute gives me your emails. I would love to chat with you guys and really learn more about how, one, we can support programs like this and figure out what this could look like moving forward. So creative. And I will just say, as a digital evangelist, love the thoughtfulness and the uniqueness of your approach to each platform. So really amazing. No surprise, obviously, because you built them for your own peers, but really amazing. My big question for you guys, which is something that I'm thinking a lot through, is just gamification. Everything we do, we're thinking a lot, the gamifying notion of how much more that increases engagement with these one-to-one connections, which, as we know, can be so much more influential for actual decision making. I would love to just understand how you're thinking that piece of it through. We do the same thing for voter registration, so just thinking through how gamifying can actually help increase engagement. And Nick, big congratulations on your announcement. Excited to see all you'll do and if we can ever be helpful. I work for Jen Stout here at Snapchat, so looking forward to working with you.
So the way we gamified it was making it a streak that you kept with our campaign. So instead of a streak that you kept with a friend, it was with our campaign, but you were getting value from it in that you were sharing your viewpoints on inclusion or what labels you associated with yourselves. So yeah, that was our main focus for gamifying.
So smart. I love it so much. So I'll make sure to follow up because I would love to make sure we can support you and help scale.
Thank you, Sophia. Questions from other judges? We've got about just a little over a minute left. David.
Sure. So I'll be a little bit of a contrarian compared to some of the other judges on the issue of microaggressions. I wonder, there has been some great debate over whether or not in focusing so much on microaggressions, whether we create the mentality that everyone is a victim, and especially when we're concerning perceived aggressions that might not have been intentional. I'm wondering if you factor that into your discussions early on in the project, and just how much microaggressions played into the development of your campaigns. It was clear in the video that you presented that that you were focusing on that, but how much did that translate into the total body of work?
Yeah, so in our pre-campaign research, we found that most of the individuals who were surveyed indicated that they had experienced some form of microaggressions. Therefore, we tried to build upon that and incorporate that mainly through our labels campaign. So we found that, yes, they had experienced microaggressions, but how can we form it in a way where we can combat that? And so we thought, okay, so we'll have them put a label on themselves that they think superficially represents them, but we can use that to create a deeper dialogue and conversation in between everyone to really emphasize that everyone is more than just their labels, and really to combat those microaggressions and prevent them from becoming a bigger act of targeted violence.
All right, thank you, judges, for your excellent questions, and students for your excellent answers. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce our last video submission. This comes from Missouri State University Key Campaign, Kindness Empowers Youth.
This semester, a group of 13 students from Missouri State University were tasked to create a campaign that prevents targeted violence.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Lauren.
I'm Morgan.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Sarah, and we are Key.
Kindness Empowers Youth, or KEY, is an experiential learning campaign with the goal of preventing incel violence. The KEY program educates guardians and teachers on incel violence while enacting protective measures to prevent at-risk youth from adopting incel views.
Incels are an online subculture of predominantly heterosexual men whose self-worth is defined by perceived physical and sexual inadequacy. Incels believe they are denied sex because they're unattractive. This leads to misogynistic worldviews and, in extreme cases, physical violence against women.
To design a campaign to counter incel violence, we conducted extensive secondary research, online surveys, and personal interviews with 3 experts.
Research on incel violence is limited. Several attacks over the last decade have been committed by self-identified or suspected incels. Some experts say that the incel community is an emerging domestic terrorism threat.
We interviewed Dr. John Horgan, one of the leading experts in the psychology of violent extremism, to learn more. He provided some common characteristics of incels.
So troubled histories, a real or perceived history of bullying, rejection, loneliness, depression, helplessness, a strong sense of shame at what they feel is failure on their part.
Our research efforts then turned to child development to determine when children begin to develop the skills that incels lack.
We found that children begin forming their self-concept and connections to their peer group in grades 3 through 5.
We interviewed Lacey Kerr, a clinical social worker specializing in at-risk youth, to learn more. She confirmed that teaching self-esteem and emotional intelligence at this age can help overcome trauma and risk factors later in life.
While many schools have implemented anti-bullying campaigns, we found few learning programs that build those skills. Primary school teacher Erin Giglio provided us guidance for how to design an educational program that can be implemented in the classroom.
To measure behaviors and beliefs related to youth internet use, emotional intelligence education, and incel violence, we designed online surveys for both at-risk youth and their parents.
Youth respondents reported that they feel uncomfortable talking about their feelings. They're also spending a lot of time online at home and at school.
Adult respondents believe that teaching soft skills like self-awareness, confidence, and self-esteem is important for children.
We also measured general awareness of incel violence. Despite 49% of respondents indicating that they were familiar with the term incel, only 15.7% were able to provide an accurate description.
Our research led us right to our primary target market, at-risk youth in grades 3, 4, and 5. These students are preparing to make the transition to middle school. They're sharpening social skills and building relationships with peers, but are susceptible to low self-esteem and feelings of inferiority. They're accustomed to online learning tools and enjoy playing video games that offer customization and intermittent rewards.
Plus, the fact that these 3 grades are usually housed in the same building makes them ideal for a 3-step educational program.
Key secondarily targets parents and peers. These tech-savvy millennials and Gen Xer parents and educators are capable, willing, and eager to participate in a program like Key. They are heavy social media users and tend to let their kids problem solve on their own.
Educators in this group are becoming more responsible for teaching outside of academic subject areas and recognize the importance of equipping youth with the soft skills they need for the future.
The key strategy is simple: empower, educate, engage. Key empowers at-risk youth by teaching emotional intelligence, self-concept, and team-building skills.
Key educates guardians and teachers about incel violence through strategic communication. Parents and teachers gain an understanding of incel violence, risk factors, and protective measures. Key emphasizes that while not every child will be affected by incel violence, every child can benefit from learning to value themselves and others for what's on the inside.
Key engages students, parents, and teachers on an accessible platform that can be used at home or in schools with both physical and digital activity options. Through the use of thoughtful design, relatable characters, and an engaging secret agent theme, Key creates an environment where kids, guardians, and teachers feel safe to explore difficult topics.
Our secret agent cats allow students to identify with the characters without the barriers of race or gender. One mom even said that the characters help sneak in the vegetables, and well, we couldn't have said it better ourselves.
To accomplish our objectives of empower, educate, engage, Key utilizes 4 major tactics.
The Key website serves as a central hub for our campaign. This cleverly designed, easy-to-navigate site houses all of our educational materials.
Separate URLs for students and adults allow students to enjoy our activities while we educate guardians and teachers on the heavier topics of our campaign.
The adult section of our website contains links to relevant articles and activities that cover topics like child mental health, targeted violence, incels, and misogyny. Here, parents can access the materials they need to continue Key's learning objectives at home.
Secret agent-themed lesson plans that we call missions focus on key learning outcomes. Each mission comes in 3 grade levels so students can grow within the program. Missions can be printed or completed online.
With the transition to at-home learning, we made our lesson plans available for free. We provide clear learning objectives and instructions so parents have the option to complete it alongside their child or allow children to work independently.
Teachers can print comprehensive lesson plans designed for the classroom that can be used when in-person learning returns. These easy-to-follow classroom lesson plans include detailed instructions, discussion prompts, and team-building activities, in addition to the key mission worksheets.
We also created playful introduction videos for each lesson plan, so students are excited and ready to learn. These videos star the key CAT agents. They introduce the concepts and provide instructions for the following lesson.
To really engage students and reinforce the learning outcomes of the lesson plans, we developed a video game called Key Academy.
Key Academy gives students the opportunity to experience different social scenarios and learn the value of self-esteem. Players become agents by assembling a team and working together to complete training missions. The game promotes learning by allowing students to independently practice the skills they've learned in the lesson plans.
You can find Key on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. To build engagement, we ran 6 campaigns through Facebook Business Manager to tailor them to specific groups of people. We analyzed which ads worked best for certain groups and experimented with segmenting our audience. Business Manager allowed us to display our ads on additional websites and platforms affiliated with Facebook and YouTube.
Because we weren't able to take Key into classrooms as originally planned to test effectiveness, we hosted virtual focus groups with parents and educators to evaluate our campaign.
Parents loved our cohesive branding, cat characters, and the option to choose how involved they wanted to be in their child's learning. They felt that their children would enjoy and benefit from Key.
Teachers were excited that each mission incorporates vocabulary, writing, and critical thinking skills to maximize their utility.
They also appreciated the thoughtful organization of our classroom lesson plans and the inclusion of team-building activities. This quote pretty much sums it up.
I love how everything comes packaged together. If you gave me a binder with everything nicely assembled and displayed like what you just showed me, I would absolutely use it in my classroom.
To further test the effectiveness of our program, we sent Key Agent Starter Kit boxes with 3 key missions and agent gear to 22 test market students.
Students quickly identified with their favorite cat character. The most popular item in the box was the invisible ink pen. Parents of our testers remarked how the invisible ink helped their child be honest in their responses on the worksheets. They also worked great for drawing on dogs.
After completing the program, 75% of students said they discovered internal strengths they didn't know they had and learned new ways to cope with their emotions. 100% of students said they would like it if they received worksheets like these from their teacher and enjoyed our game and characters.
Now time for a budget breakdown. We spent a total of $937. A large percentage of this was spent on Secret Agent starter kits. This was extremely important because it helped us gain direct feedback and endorsements from both our target markets and encouraged peer-to-peer sharing.
27% of the budget was spent on social media advertisements, which raised awareness of our campaign and increased traffic to our social pages and website. We reached an average of 19,300 people with each ad campaign for a total reach of 115,000. Our impressions were equally astounding. Each campaign averaged 26,000 impressions for a total of 159,000.
9% went to developing and hosting our website. This allowed us to create an easy-to-navigate environment for our target market to learn about our campaign and test our products.
Beyond COVID-19, our biggest challenge in designing Key was the lack of published incel research. It was a bit intimidating at first, but we used what research was available and explored incel message boards and forums to understand the community. Our conversation with John Horgan helped us understand the need for a program like Key.
Key has big plans for the future. With an established digital platform and support from elementary school teachers, counselors, and parents in our community, Key is sustainable and prepared to scale.
We've applied for the Youth Resilience Grant from the Department of Homeland Security to continue the program. Through participation in educational conferences and outreach to school administrators and teachers, we will bring Key to schools across Missouri and beyond.
When implemented into schools, Key will function as a 3-year program for grades 3 through 5. At the end of each year, students will give a presentation to their peers about what they have learned. When students reach 5th grade, they will become Key captains and have the opportunity to mentor younger agents.
The Key Academy game presents endless opportunities for expansion. We plan to develop additional levels to correspond with new lesson plans. As levels increase, players will gain the ability to unlock rewards. Key Academy will also feature an online component so players can interact with their peers. In the future, we hope to create a downloadable app for use on mobile devices.
The Agent Starter Kit will be available for sale on our website, and the revenue will provide additional funding to sustain the program. A variety of box options will be available for traditional classroom use, at-home schooling, or for use by counselors.
Now, that was a lot of information. Let's recap.
Key empowers at-risk youth through engaging lesson plans that focus on key psychological and developmental areas where incels are lacking.
Key educates the community on incel violence in a gradual yet impactful way.
Key engages our target markets on an accessible online platform.
Throughout this campaign, we created 1 video game prototype, 9 worksheets, 9 classroom lesson plans, 5 promotional videos, and 3 social media channels.
This is just the beginning. Now our campaign is going beyond this competition as we work to bring Key to schools and help even more students unlock their character.
All right, thank you, Key, for your amazing video submission. I invite Missouri State University students, Jordan Galkowski, Morgan George, Lauren Kerr, Jordan Moore, and Sarah Thomas to turn on your video feeds and answer questions from our judges. Judges and students, you have 5 minutes. I want to prioritize judges who didn't get a chance to ask questions in the last round. Beth, do you want to jump in? Oh, you're muted.
I am, thank you. Happy to jump in with a question now. I thought that was an absolutely fantastic idea and really applaud your decision to start young with 3rd to 5th grade. I think that's a great idea. I'd be curious to know how you plan to basically make this program cool. I know that anything that students perceive as coming from administrators or parents or school might be, not their first choice to do in their free time. So I'm curious if you've got ideas for how to integrate this with other apps or games that kids might be playing outside of school.
So to make our game really enjoyable for our students, we want to incorporate characters and offer different kinds of rewards that they can unlock as they progress in the game, like new accessories and things like that. We found in our research that those are the features that really keep kids engaged in a video game.
And Kim, I think you were about to jump in earlier. Yes, go ahead.
I found your website, love what you guys are trying to do. And it seems to me that you started on the incel problem and you taught me a lot about how people become incels, but then you went much broader with the solution. And 2 things on your website, teaching emotional resilience strikes me as, wow, if I'm a parent, I want to hear more about this. But I didn't see who in the sort of educational world has signed off on it. People always look for seals of approval other than a bunch of really cool students at Missouri. And the other thing is, do you still need to list incel on the website? Because I think that might turn some people off, even though it was the genesis of the whole project.
Yeah, we wanted to keep incel on there for educating the parents
and the teachers that we have there. The kids side is completely separate, so they can't access that information because we didn't want to set these young kids to that kind of ideology. We wanted to keep it separate for the parents and teachers and then allow the kids to play their activities and games, as one parent said, and sneak in those vegetables for them.
Mark, did you have any questions?
Well, first off, I was extraordinarily impressed with the approach that you had. What I particularly liked is you didn't just say things, you illustrated them. So I was struck by how in the beginning, you, in a series of quick images and video, you actually showed us, someone like me, you showed us signs of what it is that you're talking about how incel is accessed. Secondly, as a parent, you told me what it is, because it's not something that I think the average parent necessarily knows, but clearly should. And so I think the way that you laid out some definitions quickly, I don't think it bogged it down, but the way that you did that, I thought was particularly interesting and good. And then finally, it may seem like a simple thing, but at the end, you did a recap. And I think that recap was important because you throw a lot at us. It's pretty substantive, especially since you're targeting both the youth, the target audience of youth, but also educators and parents. So it's an awful lot to pull together. And the fact that you did a recap like that and had the illustrations, I thought was very useful. Only question I had was actually building on one you heard from Kim, and that was, and I'm the parent of a teacher, when we start looking at content for teachers and in the classroom, what kind of information and resources are you using to pull that together?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So have used a variety of content from teacher lesson plans, but what we wanted to incorporate with our key lesson plans was the use of vocabulary and writing that teachers are already incorporating in their classrooms. So our key programs complement the programs that are already going on. So
you're looking at existing lesson plans and building on parallel themes.
Exactly. And the third grade vocabulary matches with the third grade vocabulary for the key missions, and same thing for fourth and fifth graders as well.
Great, thank
And
you.
Nick, I saw your hand raised.
Just a very brief question. So there's a huge amount to be impressed with and to love about this campaign, but the thing that probably impressed me the most was the fact that you delivered product in the mail to somebody to actually do something. This didn't only exist in the virtual environment. And I found that really, really, really compelling. Did you have some way of gathering a feedback loop from those people, the teachers who were using your material and sharing it with students to kind of refine your processes and refine your products going forward?
Yes, so we held 2 various focus groups for our children and the teachers as well. And we found that the teachers are actually looking for a program like this to implement into their schools. And as for the Secret Agent starter kits, we asked them how the starter kits would measure their effectiveness of this.
Thank you.
Right, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Rick, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. Love the video. I agree with Mark. You know, that recap at the end was really fantastic to pull it all together. I thought you did a really nice job with that. And to Nick's point and Mark's point, I just got finished with a program, and $10 million later, they still hadn't produced a tangible product that was aimed at elementary school children to help them better learn in a certain area. So, you know, I think one of the challenges we have in academia is, you know, to what extent are your faculty members saying, hey, this is great, but we're going to have to put it through a lot more tests, and we're going to have to do a lot more evaluation with it, and we're going to have to do a lot more research with it before we can actually get it out there, versus your approach, which I really love, which is let's just do it. Let's base that on existing work, and let's get it out there as quickly as possible and do it for $1,000 instead of $10 million. So how are your faculty members thinking through the way that they want to validate, you know, evaluate what you're doing?
Yeah, so Right now, a lot of the teachers that we have been in contact with have had lesson plans similar that teach kindness for others, but they're lacking kindness for inside themselves. And so that's where a key can step in and be that gap that teachers and schools are missing. And so that's what we're going to be evaluating throughout the lesson plans, is if students are able to recognize the kindness within themselves and value their internal qualities.
All right. Thank you, judges, and thank you, Missouri State University Key team. Excellent work by all. Now I want to ask the audience, ideally we'd be in one big room together and you could give a huge round of applause for all teams. So please go ahead and do that at your own personal computer. Please join me in thanking and congratulating all 3 teams on their very strong performances today and their hard work all semester. The judges are going to step away onto a separate conference line now to deliberate for up to 10 minutes. Judges, again, please don't join from this computer. Go to a separate device, join from there. I will join you on that line momentarily. For our audience, while the judges deliberate, you will have an opportunity to see an informational video about the McCain Institute, as well as some background on broader programs available and offered by the McCain Institute. If you want to step away from your computer momentarily to grab a cup of coffee or anything you might need to do, that is fine, but please be sure to join us back no later than 10 minutes from now for the final announcements of the awards for today, as well as closing remarks from Executive Director of the McCain Institute, Mark Green. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you momentarily.
At the McCain Institute, we are proud to be in the arena. We strive every day to fight for what we believe is right. We strive to make a difference, even when we know that change is difficult and the pace of change is slow. We aspire to take on a cause and a fight, not just critique from the sidelines. We have established programs in combating human trafficking, advancing human rights, empowering the next generation of global leaders, promoting the rule of law, national security, and counterterrorism. The McCain Institute is about advancing character-driven leadership. That's what John was. That's who he was as a leader and as a public servant. Being a McCain is serving a cause greater than your own self-interest. It's a family of service. Well, the McCain Institute is an action-based institute. Not just talks the talk, but we walk the walk. I'm proud of the people that have gotten involved in the Institute. We've had leaders from across all walks of life, from sports to national leadership to international leadership, have gotten involved and been a part of the discussion and the conversation about issues that face not only the United States, but face us globally. Get in the arena, become a maverick, get involved in your communities, in your cities, in your states, in the world, wherever you choose to. But stand up and get active, and let's do this. A spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance cannot be paralyzed by fear. We cannot give up on ourselves and on each other.
We stand for truth against falsehood, freedom against tyranny, right against injustice, hope against despair. I believe we must always stand up for it, for if we do not, who will?
All right, welcome back, everyone. This was a very tight competition with strong entries from all three teams. I am pleased to introduce Mark Green, Executive Director of the McCain Institute, to offer a few closing remarks and announce the awards. Take it away, Mark.
Great, thanks, Brett. And I can vouch for the fact that it was a very close competition.
Mark, you muted.
I shouldn't be. I don't appear to be muted.
We can hear you, Mark.
Okay, great. So Brett, thanks to you and your team for the great work that you've done to bring us to this day. I would say that you're only surpassed by our contestants themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, as Brett has alluded to, or as many of you know, I'm a recovering politician, and that means that I've judged a lot of competitions in my lifetime, from chili cook-offs to milking contests. After all, I am from Wisconsin. But in all seriousness, I can't think of one that's more important or more timely than the competition that we've had today. So let's be frank. The Black Lives Matter movement protests have done a great service to America by forcing us all to look ourselves in the mirror, to admit that racism, inequality, and injustice are not merely history, they are reality in too many communities across this country. We're here in part because more than half of all Americans say they were subjected to hateful speech and harassment in 2018. And the FBI director has identified 2019 as the deadliest year ever for domestic terrorism, deadliest year since even the Oklahoma City truck bombings of 1995. Our namesake, John McCain, called on all Americans to unite against hatred and bigotry. I could not be more proud of these teams for answering that call and enlisting their communities to do the same. To the participant teams, you have demonstrated what's possible when each of us speak up and do our part to end hate-based violence. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, one that I know challenged you in so many ways, audiences are hungry for positive strategies to reduce violence and to heal our wounds. I commend all of you for your commitment and for service to a cause greater than yourselves. You are well on your way to being the character-driven leaders that our country needs right now. Regardless of the results of this competition, which I promise to announce in just a moment, I hope that all of you will continue to build on your efforts both on and off campus. Use this competition and the prize money you're about to receive as a springboard to take your campaigns to the next level. I think what impressed us most as judges is that each of you took a different approach, but each of those approaches was valid, and each of those approaches is scalable. And I know that with the money that you're about to receive, there's a lot more that you can do, and we're all looking forward to seeing it. So without further ado, the McCain Institute is pleased to award $1,000 to Johns Hopkins University for its remarkable project. Johns Hopkins used trivia to mobilize what they've referred to as a silent majority, to get them moving so they'll be silent no longer, and to show that they are a majority and they're change makers. Next, we are delighted to award $3,000 to Arizona State University. Arizona State University impressed all of the judges for how seriously it took the challenges that are presented by that term incel. And they were very purposeful in not using that term, but instead getting at the problems it represents without turning off an audience to make sure that they remain relevant. And we were also impressed with the scalability that was built into their project. And finally, it gives me great pleasure to award $5,000 in top honors to Missouri State University for its remarkable contribution. What I think impressed all of us is the fact that you enlisted not just the targeted youth themselves, but parents and educators in this cause. We think there is remarkable potential for your project as well as the others. We challenge you to take this day and go higher and go further. And we're looking forward again to watching you succeed. Thanks to all of you. Thanks very much. Brett?
Thank you to everyone for joining the virtual finals of the Peer-to-Peer Protective Project sponsored by the McCain Institute and ASU Enterprise Partners. Congratulations to all of the teams, especially MSU, for all of your hard work this semester. We are excited to see how these programs continue to grow and evolve over time. Congratulations, teams, and thank you everyone for joining today.